International news now, and US President Donald Trump has called on Israel not to drop any bombs as a ceasefire between Tel Aviv and Tehran seems unlikely to hold. Earlier, Trump claimed that a ceasefire was indeed in effect. In the last hour before heading out to the NATO meeting in Europe, Trump used a choice word, saying the two sides have been warring for so long that they don't know what they are doing. Let's unpack the latest developments here. We speak to Dr. Jean-Marc Rickli. He's the head of global and emerging risks at the Geneva Centre for Security Policy. Dr. Rickli, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. I mean, is there even a question at this point whether there is a ceasefire in place?
Well, from President Trump's perspective, it is indeed what he wants, because he wants to score a major success. That's why he has pushed quite harshly Prime Minister Netanyahu to actually force him to bring back the planes that were on board inbound to Iran. So President Trump, in a way, piggybacked on the original success of the Israeli against Iran. He wants to be seen as a peacemaker, and I think that he's very serious about the ceasefire. Now he has some important leverage on Israel, not the least a delivery of weapons, and that's why Netanyahu has to abide by what Mr. Trump told him. So you would have seen President Trump's comments on the lawns of the White House there, where he said, Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen. That's a quote from that sort of walk past the camera mics that were there. And that quote is from an interview with Al Jazeera. Was there ever going to be a sustainable ceasefire with the US sanctioning it when the US was the one that escalated this war? Well, I wouldn't say that the U.S. escalated this war. I think, as I mentioned earlier, the U.S. piggybacked on the success of the Israeli. The Israeli probably saw a window of opportunities to attack Iran and then the Iranian government, because the traditional surrogates, the proxies of Iran in the region have been severely weakened over the last years. And if you remember, there were also ongoing negotiations between the U.S. and South Africa, and Iran regarding the nuclear program, and the window of opportunity was closing. So the U.S. has, in a way, made, if it stops there, this is what we call an act of coercive diplomacy, which is the threat or the limited use of force in order to implement a specific foreign policy objective. And in this case, probably it is not about regime change. It's about degrading Iran nuclear capabilities, and then probably settle for a ceasefire. That's the American perspective.
Coercive diplomacy. That's a very diplomatic way of describing that, isn't it, Dr. Rickli? In terms of...
No, not really. It's actually a concept that is used in international relations. You know, you have to differentiate between war and coercive diplomacy, which is a part of a tool of foreign policy. And since President Trump's remarks on the lawns of the White House there, is it true that there's been another strike since then? There was a strike. There has been a strike on Beersheba, so in Israel, and so the Israelis sent planes to probably strike and to strike Iran. And this is where basically when President Trump called Prime Minister Netanyahu to actually stop that, because he really would like to enforce this ceasefire. From President Trump's perspective, he wrote on Truth Social that he called it the 12 days war, probably also in reference to the 6-Day War of 1967. President Trump really would like to be perceived as the president that is making peace. I think he really is really serious in being willing to get the Nobel Prize in peace, and so Probably he's working on that. The issue, though, is that the parties on the ground might have a different opinion. For the Iranian government, ceasefire might be welcome because they suffered heavy destruction damage, and so they would like this ceasefire could be used to rebuild. From the Israeli perspective, maybe not so much, because you know that when you have momentum in military operation, you would like to keep it. But as I mentioned earlier, the Israelis are heavily dependent on the delivery of weapons by the United States, and therefore the United States have a huge leverage on Israel.
What do you make of Dr. Rickli, J.D. Vance, the US Vice President's comments about not being at war with Iran, but being at war with Iran's nuclear program, and then just some hours ago saying that Iran is now incapable of building on its nuclear program?
Well, in a way, it's a similar statement that Prime Minister Netanyahu made at the very first day, differentiating between, in the case of Netanyahu, the Iranian government and the Iranian population. Israel did not strike against the Iranian population, but against the regime and its nuclear program. J.D. Vance basically restricted it to the Iranian nuclear program. Now, it is probably too soon to assess the damage that have been done by the U.S. strikes in Iran, because we simply don't have access to the facilities. But what could be already inferred from what we've seen is that the capabilities for enriching uranium have been degraded, and the question is how back in time has the time for enriching this uranium gone? So are we moving back 1 month, 2 months, a few years? Has it been destroyed completely? And that is still unknown because we don't have enough data.
And then it also, I suppose, raises a question, Dr. Rickli, about in terms of the Middle East, who is allowed to have nuclear capabilities? I mean, what do we know so far to be confirmed about Israel's capabilities, for example?
Right, yeah. So you have 5 official nuclear powers, which are the permanent member of the Security Council, so China, Russia, the United States, France, and the UK. And then you have an official power, North Korea, India, Pakistan, and Israel. And so the issue with nuclear proliferation is that the more states that get access to nuclear weapons, the more possibilities there are for miscalculation, for accidents, and therefore the more unstable it becomes. The issue with Iran getting a nuclear bomb would have been, or is still, that its neighbor could feel threatened and also build a nuclear bomb, like namely Saudi Arabia. And you can see how this process could unfold. So the international community, through the NPT, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, has tried to curb this proliferation, and you have Israel, Pakistan, and India who did not sign it. You had in the past North Korea that signed it but withdrew in 2003, and Iran that is part of the NPT and that could now potentially use the threat to withdraw from the treaty to try to play a role in the diplomatic game. If Iran would do that, then Iran would no longer be subject to IAEA inspection, would no longer be subject to the provision that they could not develop a nuclear weapons, and therefore that could potentially make the situation more unstable in the region.
So now, in terms of the ceasefire, Dr. Rickli, is it for now a back and forth, a tit for tat between these two nations?
Yeah, I mean, it remains to be seen because it's very soon, as you've seen. Right after the ceasefire was declared, there has been strikes. So I think we need the dust to settle to see where we're going. But in any case, this equilibrium is very fragile, and I think that the US have a huge leverage again on Israel because Israel, from the very beginning, is unable to sustain a prolonged military operation in Iran because they simply don't have the capabilities. They rely on the United States. What is also interesting is the declaration of Qatar today that basically they were trying to appease the tensions. And so here you can see that the countries in the region, the Gulf countries, are trying to make the situation to reduce, if you want, the level of hostility in the region. Now, the problem is that it's always possible that one decides to strike, or that proxies of Iran, for instance, the Houthis, decide to strike Israel, and then that would lead probably to retaliation. So the next few days will be very important to see how strong this ceasefire is.
Dr. Jean-Marc Rickli, let me thank you for your time. Live to us there from Geneva. He is the head of global and emerging risks at the Geneva Centre for Security Policy.